For those of us enamored with giant robots locked in titanic struggles with an array of exotic kaiju, and for those of us who want to see this in live action, not just in anime or cartoons, there's only one place to go: Pacific Rim. Today on The Missing Protagonist, we'll be diving into Guillermo del Toro's beautifully crafted, beat-down blockbuster, Pacific Rim, and removing Raleigh Beckett, pilot of iconic Jaeger Gipsy Danger, and seeing how things might have gone in his absence. Now, as far as how we'll rid ourselves of Raleigh in this alternate timeline, I think that one could be quite simple. He dies shortly after his brother in the battle with Knifehead. Not only does this change very little in the lead up to the core events of the movie, we also get to take solace in the fact that Raleigh didn't have to live long with the memory of his brother dying while linked to him. Every cloud, right? That might be a little dark. This video might be a bit jumpy and a bit sloppy in places, and there will be large jumps, as large portions of Pacific Rim just do not happen without Raleigh Beckett and Marco Mori's interactions. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. Initially in this alternate timeline, I don't see a great deal changing. Gipsy Danger was taken out of commission after the fight with Knifehead in the original timeline, and after the death of his brother, Raleigh would retire from the Jaeger program anyway. So as such, we're basically going to have to assume the film's events would have taken place regardless, leading all the way up to Pentecost coming to find Raleigh on the anti-kaiju wall. Gipsy Danger had been recommissioned long before Raleigh had ever agreed to rejoin the Jaeger program, so we have to then assume that there was a contingency plan in place. This could be further proved by the amount of drift-compatible candidates ready for Raleigh to face in his hunt to find a new partner. Which leads us to the first major character whose arc could have been affected: Marco. Marco Mori's storyline and character arc run hand in hand with Raleigh Beckett's, so obviously without Raleigh present, Marco's storyline would have been entirely different. With no Raleigh, Marco would not have been given the ability to impress Pentecost in the way that she did. Who's to say she would have had the same chemistry with any of the other candidates? It's hard for me to say in particular, but without that prompt, I cannot see Pentecost wanting to risk her, or getting over his protective nature as he did in the original timeline. Herman and Newt would still continue their operations at the Shatterdome. Newt would still drift with the Kaiju brain, still resulting in him being sent to Hannibal Chow before the double event, then to the Refuge Center. We shall come back to Newt a little later. So with that little said, we are almost already there, and able to move on to the climax of the movie. That's how little plot happens. Not knocking the film, I absolutely love it, I think the character interactions are brilliant, but a good portion of this movie are just purely interactions between Raleigh and Marco and some of the other Jaeger pilots. While I don't think much changes initially, I feel the major impact of Raleigh's death would not be felt until the 3 Jaeger deployment in Hong Kong against the double event of Otachi and Leatherback. And funnily enough, I see this as being a bit of a net positive, without Mako's meltdown during its trial run. It's likely Gipsy Danger would have been deployed alongside Cherno Alpha, Crimson Typhoon and Striker Eureka, with Gipsy Danger being crewed by new, albeit far less experienced pilots. With Eureka staying back as it had done in the original timeline, this would allow the Jaegers a potential 3-on-1 advantage in the initial fight with Otachi before Leatherback made himself known. Due to this possibility, I think this fight would have gone a lot better for the Jaeger team than in the original timeline, potentially taking minimal losses or just some damage. In the original timeline, Crimson Typhoon and Cherno are doing quite well against Otachi before Crimson Typhoon has its head ripped off by Otachi's tail, before they're hit with the acid spray. In this instance, I could easily see Cherno Alpha, Striker Eureka, and one of either maybe Crimson Typhoon or Gipsy Danger making it back to the Shatterdome. This would probably all depend on the deployment decisions. A combination of Gipsy and Cherno would be the most logical in my opinion, purely due to the experience of Cherno's pilots and the inexperience of Gipsy's new pilots. We could still see Otachi destroy Crimson Typhoon before being brought down by the pairing. I then see the pair with the aid of Striker Eureka making very short work of Leatherback. Now this moving forward would inadvertently lead to a major change and potentially the downfall of humanity. Now with both Kaiju having died in the ocean outside of Hong Kong, Newt would have been unable to drift with the Kaiju for a second time, That means the Jaegers would be hitting the breach blind. Even should he manage to convince Chow to retrieve one of the brains from the sea, a highly unlikely task if we're being honest, Newt and Herman wouldn't have made it back to the base in time to warn the strike team. So this would leave our albeit stronger task force consisting of Striker Eureka, Gipsy Danger and Cherno Alpha unable to successfully close the breach should they make it past the 3 Kaiju defending it, which is highly unlikely. Gipsy and Striker barely made it to the breach in the original timeline, only after Striker detonated the nuclear device. Neither Jaeger made it to the breach in a solid fighting shape. Either way, we shall continue. I see the Strike Force encountering the exact same issues in this timeline as it did in the original, with all of the Jaegers taking heavy damage and having difficulty reaching the breach. The biggest change here, however, is the inexperience of the Gipsy Danger crew. Without the prowess of the Raleigh-led Gipsy, it's likely Gipsy would have been ripped to shreds by the combination of Scunner, Raiju and Slattern. Cherno, I feel, is just here for the mass at this point as protection. Its size and weight working against it in the pressure of the ocean depths. She's basically a paperweight. And without support, it's likely Striker Eureka would also be lost, leaving the Pacific Rim defenseless and the Jaeger program all but spent. While conventional weapons may have fended off the Kaiju for a set amount of time, I believe humanity would have slowly lost ground.
If you've enjoyed the video up until now guys, be sure to hit that like button as it helps push out the channel enormously whenever you do. And if you feel so inclined, hit the subscribe button for more. Now, before I leave you, I always like to leave a question at the end of my videos as to how things could have gone in the future. For those of you who have been paying attention, you will have noticed that while all the Jaegers may have been lost, both Stacker and Mako are still alive. The Shatter Dome is fully staffed, and with faith restored in the Jaegers after the Sydney and Hong Kong defences, with Hong Kong's defence being almost immaculate in this timeline, could Stacker Pentecost convince the world's governments to fund the Jaeger program? Could Mako Mori and the remaining Jaeger cadets make the transition to pilots? This could potentially be a viable option provided the Kaiju don't immediately pour through the breach. We know that in the past, Jaegers have been constructed very quickly, with the first Jaeger prototype, Brawler Yukon, being launched just 4 months after the Jaeger program's first inception. Could the world produce enough Jaegers as the remnants of the anti-Kaiju wall is ripped apart, or would the remaining population be ground to a halt by the increased numbers of Kaiju? And now before I go, I have a small announcement to make. You guys have left so many awesome ideas and suggestions in my comment section, and it's been an absolute pleasure to read through and interact with them. And as a fan first and foremost of the characters, stories and lore, I'd love to jump into so much more. From parts of the lore that fascinate me, I find interesting or obscure, or things that just don't make any sense, to other what-if theories and timelines. But at the same time, I do not want to dilute the core focus of this channel. When I started, it was specifically with the intention of removing the main characters from stories and plotlines, and nothing more. So as such, I'd like to bring your attention to a new channel, The Lore Room. The Lore Room is going to be my place to explore various lore topics throughout the cinematic, literary and gaming worlds. It'll be a place for all the smaller branching what-if theories regularly suggested on this channel, and more importantly, it'll be a place where I'll be able to experiment and practice my video editing and production skills, with the end goal of making this channel even better in the future. I won't be allowing this channel to take too much time away from the Missing Protagonist, as I'll only be covering topics I'm currently watching, reading, playing or researching at that specific time for a video on this channel. And for keen watchers of the show, it could be a good way to predict the content of upcoming episodes. Anyway, with humanity ground down and the world coming to a brutal, miserable end, we can end this episode at least on one positive note. This would mean we wouldn't need a Pacific Rim 2. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. And no, the Kaiju are not headed for Mount Fuji.